Hey guys, so in this video we're going to be covering making profile templates, scoring and slipping, and coil building. Let's get started. The first thing that you need to do is draw out your profile on the cardboard. Finalize your design with Sharpie and then cut it out with scissors. To roll out a coil, you just start squeezing the clay and rotating it in your hands until you have a basic log shape. Set your log on the table and then start rolling the clay from the center out to the edges, and repeat. It's important to move your hands over different parts of the clay every time you're rolling. Doing this prevents flat spots. If you do get a flat spot, there's an easy fix. You'll have a fat side and a skinny side. You're just going to set the clay on the skinny side and kind of shimmy your hands over to kind of smush the clay down, and then you can continue rolling. I always suggest making a batch of coils before you start working on your project. This will save you a lot of time and you can just focus on building. Keep them covered up with plastic so they don't dry out. To start the base for your coil pot, I always just start with a really tight swirl, and then I continue that swirl as wide as I want to make the base. I always work on a banding wheel and a board, and it makes it really easy to turn my project and access all sides of it. So you'll notice if you pick your base up that it falls apart because we haven't joined the coils together yet. So I always do that just by using my serrated rib and blending the coils together. I'm using a pretty good amount of force. What we're doing is creating a new layer of clay. Then I smooth the serrated rib marks out with a smooth rib. If you wanted to make this pot an exposed coil pot, you could leave it on the other side, but I'm choosing to make this a blended coil pot, so I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. At this point, I always cut the edges away using my needle tool. I just hold the needle tool in place and rotate the banding wheel and board at the same time, and that will leave a cut mark through your clay, and you can remove that excess jagged clay for a clean base. Now we're ready to start building up. Anytime that you are joining two pieces of clay together, it is essential to score and slip. I'm using a serrated rib here to make deep grooves in my clay. You could also use a needle tool, or really any sharp tool works for this. Next, paint on a generous amount of slip, which is just liquid clay, and this will act like glue that holds your clay together. Then I just apply some pressure and I kind of squeeze and smush the clay together as I move around the coil pot. To make things easier, I usually just score my whole coil before I start putting it onto my coil pot. This usually makes things just go faster, and you always want to make sure that you're scoring both pieces of clay that you're trying to join together. Apply some slip. Make sure that you don't add too much slip. If your clay is getting wetter and wetter, it's going to get weaker and weaker, so just use enough to make sure that they stick together. And then you're off to building. So you'll notice that on top of the coil you just added, there is no scoring mark. So you're going to have to pause and apply some scoring marks, and then you can apply some more slip onto that area, and then you're good to go to start building again. After you've built up 3 or 4 coils, you'll want to pause and take some time to blend those coils together. I'm using a serrated rib, applying a good amount of pressure, and we're just creating a new layer of clay so your clay doesn't crack apart later. Then smooth those serrated rib marks out with your smooth metal rib. I always try to smooth each section that I build out with the smooth rib first, because as your clay gets taller, it's going to get harder and harder to reach the inside. So if you just do it in segments, it makes it a lot easier as you go along. A good way to tell if you've done a good job joining your coils together is to kind of pull up on it and see if it sticks together. From here, you're just going to keep building up your coils and trying to follow this form as best you can. So when you're building, it's common to have areas that are higher and lower. So to fix that, you're just gonna score and slip and apply a coil to those low parts, and hopefully that will even it out so you can keep building up and it will all be the same height again. Just make those adjustments as you go to try to make sure everything is the same height as you're building. Again, I'm blending the inside and the outside with my serrated rib and smoothing things out with my smooth rib. As I'm doing this, I'm always supporting the outside with my hand on the outside, and that will keep the clay from going too far out. At this point, my clay is a little bit too wet to continue building. If I did continue to build, it would probably fall down on itself. So I just set it outside to dry for 10-15 minutes. Make sure that you're rotating it so it dries evenly. After it's dried for 10-15 minutes, it should be a little bit more stiff and able to support more weight as you build up. So because I'm going to be adding softer clay to this leather hard clay, you want to make sure that you score and slip super well so your clay doesn't form a crack where these two clays are meeting. I'm also going to make sure that I do a really good job blending that soft clay down into that leather hard clay, again, so we just don't get cracks where those two clays meet. There are some strategies for adjusting your form if it's not quite lining up with your cardboard template. To expand the clay, I usually just use my smooth metal rib and I press out and guide the clay outwards from the inside. You can use a paddle to kind of lightly tap around the outside of your form to kind of straighten things out and also move the clay inward. Just keep making these adjustments as you go. When you run out of time to work in class, just store your artwork for later on your class shelves. I always wrap mine in 2 layers of plastic and I tuck the plastic underneath my board. Make sure that all of the plastic is tucked under and there's no gaps, and then you can put it on your class shelf to store for next class. Have fun!